Good morning, everyone. Thank you for gracing this occasion. And before I make my presentation on William Carey and India, I would like to thank the Bengali Visiting Fellowship, which has helped me to access the treasures of the Bengali libraries, especially the Weston Library and the Angus Library and Archive at Regent's Park College. Thank you, Dr. Franklin, Emma, Emily, Rebecca, and Rachel. Thank you very much for your trust and support. You see, in this letter to Mr. Dyer from Serampore on 9 December 1825, William Carey actually writes, "My heart is wedded to India." Now, Carey's journey to India during this 41 years of stay through his pioneering work in philology, science, and education has permanently associated him with the British Orientalists in Calcutta and with the Bengalis. Through his interdisciplinary endeavors, Carey was able to locate his empathy and humanitarianism in the context of the larger search for liberation, grounded in the universalist ethos of the 19th century Bengal Renaissance. He remains a classic example of a critical cosmopolitan who learned from differences and tried to understand and assimilate within his own self the spirit and mind of India, and took ardent steps to connect the world to the cultural heritage of India, which was long unknown. This socio-cultural process not only brought few philanthropic Indians and Europeans into the forefront, but also underlined Europe's general perspective towards India, which was governed by alterity and self-representation. That is, India is the exotic and the uncomfortable, and the idea of European identity as a superior one in comparison with all the non-European people and cultures. Interestingly, Carey, like a few Europeans out of interest, tried to apprentice himself to know and understand India, not through an accepted grid for filtering the Orient into the Western consciousness. William Carey and his activities in Bengal or India may be explored in the context of pre-Scythian Orientalism, which can be reviewed today as signifiers challenging the container theory of national cultures as separate entities, and justifying the principle of the hybrid interlocking interdependence of cultures in the age of globalization, for accelerating a mutually enriching encounter between human beings from diverse backgrounds. This school initiated a self-fulfilling scholarly venture for the large-hearted European Orientalists, with the Indian reformers being oriented towards a neo-Orientalism which ensured an engraftment, emphasizing the importance of explicitly adapting Indian languages and knowledge, as well as social structures within a universal developmental framework. Amidst all my findings at the Angus Library and Archive, Regent's Park College, and the Western Library Bodleian, I take the earnest pleasure to share with you information regarding the manuscript of the first edition of William Carey's A Grammar of the Bengali Language that was published in 1801. This is the manuscript, his own handwriting. And the other editions were published in 1805, 1815, 1818, and posthumously 1843. And William Carey and Joshua Marshman's translation of the Ramayuna. Though the first edition of Carey's A Grammar of Bengali Language was published in 1801, however, from one of his letters which was written on 2nd October 1795, we can understand that Carey had begun his work to formulate a grammar of the Bengali language during his stay at Madnavati. That was where he went before heading to Serampore. In the first edition, there are 12 sections, namely alphabets, substantives, adjectives, pronouns, verbs, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, interjections of compound words, syntax, and contraction of numbers. He considered the second edition of A Grammar of Bengali Language, that is in 1805, to be the new composition with a more accurate knowledge. Now, these are the sections which are present in the second edition. Dr. Carey had never actually engaged himself to any considerable extent in the prosecution of Hindu literature. It is this particular point which he writes in his memoirs and which gives me to move away from the decolonial stance, which is the call of the day. So, one of the proposals which he placed before the Asiatic Society of Bengal in May 1805 was to translate and publish important works in Sanskrit, for which they had eagerly requested financial assistance from the mother institution. Carey and Marshman had the sufficient foresight to appreciate the value of such works in Sanskrit, which represent the cultural heritage of India, and wanted the West to know about it. The Asiatic Society of Bengal and Sir John Anstruther considered their proposal favorably and constituted a committee in cooperation with the Council of the College of Fort William to select the work for translation and publication by the Serampur missionaries under Bibliotheca Asiatica, simultaneously along with Asiatic researchers. This is the title page of Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Ramayana. And you have to remember that the motive for undertaking such project in translating the principal works of Sanskrit was not only to preserve the works of the learned of the ancient India from perishing, but to exhibit just ideas about religion, the doctrine and the mythology, the current ideas, the manners and customs of Hindus, that is the cultural heritage of India to the West, enabling them to appreciate their value. This is the title page, and the first volume you have 656 pages, which is a faithful translation of Valmeeki's Ramayana, and the name is also the main aim is to uplift righteousness or dharma. And you have to remember that the first translation of Carey's Bible is also entitled as Dharma Pustak, which is uplifting the righteousness. You have the second title page, which is the second volume has 522 pages. Next, you have the third volume, which is actually having 492 pages. But now I'll come to the more interesting volume, that is volume 4. So, it was initially planned that the entire translation of the Ramayana by Carey and Marshman would be done in the course of 10 volumes, or with 500 pages in each volume. And the cost of publishing each volume was not negligible, and the situation became difficult after the fire which attacked the Serampur Baptist Mission Press on 12 March 1812 that engulfed many manuscripts and books at the Serampur Mission Press. And historians believe that the fourth volume of Ramayana was completely destroyed by fire, and therefore no copy of the fourth volume is available, along with some other publications. So to my surprise, you will see that one copy of the substantial part of the fourth volume, that is this one, has been preserved in the Weston Library of the Bodleian. In the spine of this book, it is written, the Ramayana Volume 4, you have Sanskrit 3.10, and in the page following, you will see that's written SANSK B.4 3.10, where B4 actually is Book 4 or Volume 4. And it has been circled. So apparently we may consider this information to be the evidence of this text to be the fourth volume. Now, though this volume is not present in any of the libraries and archives of India, but why it is present here? I was very curious. How did it come here? That is the main important thing. There may be a reason which may actually substantiate the presence of the text at Weston in Bodleian. Robert Southey was inspired by this translation of the Ramayana. He not only drew poetic inspiration from this Ramayana to create the curse of Kehama, but also praised Serampur missionaries and their efforts. Along with William Wilberforce, he was actually championing the Serampur missionaries in the British Parliament. The minutes of the Serampur Mission Press, which is preserved at Carey Library and Archive, which is in Serampur College, proves that the few copies of the fourth volume of the Ramayana were sent to England, while the copies sent to the BMS are in the Angus Library, where Emily has helped me to locate that, as the entries also prove, while this one may be the copy which was sent to Robert Southey as a gift before the fire. This fourth volume may be Robert Southey's, which was then collected or donated and preserved in the library. And the upper portion of the first page is entitled as the Ramayana, Aranyakanda, Book 3, Section 1, and it contains 64 sargas, that is sections of the Aranyakanda through a span of 520 pages. So William Carey's sense of commonness and distinction actually facilitated his interaction and association with the Indians towards a colonial civility, within which new forms of knowledge without any kind of prejudice through a secular understanding of nature and history was produced. Though this was not absolute, yet this interface which Carey initiated involved a considerable exchange where West's nefarious dogmatism and prejudiced imagination against the East stood negated towards a transnational coexistence. Bengal becomes a contact zone, and through William Carey, it becomes an in-between space which developed through a process of acculturation, resulting into affiliating the distinct, even disjunct with one another in the spirit of a right to difference in equality. Thank you.